Good morning. Mr. President, delegates from different countries, ministers of finance and central bankers, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome you in South Africa during South Africa's G20 presidency. I'm not going to make a speech. I'm going to be with you for the whole next 2 days. And I'm looking forward to the interaction with all of you on these major global issues that are confronting us today. I'm not going to be taking time, but to say I want to welcome the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, to welcome and address you. Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister of Finance of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Mr. Lesetja Kganyago, and the President of the Swiss Confederation, Her Excellency Karin Keller-Sutter, and all of you distinguished finance ministers and central bank governors of the G20 who are here present, and member states, and invited guest countries, as well as invited representatives of international organizations and regional economic communities and heads of delegations and distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. I'd like this opportunity, as customarily, I want to invite you and welcome you to the most beautiful country in the world that, if you have not visited before, you've been missing something in your life. So your life is near complete now that you are in South Africa. I say so advisedly because a few weeks ago I had occasion to go to Robben Island, and I had been to Robben Island before, as many people and South Africans aspire to go there, if nothing else to go and see where Nelson Mandela was held for so many years. And in my case, the quest was to go into his cell. He lived for many, many years, more than 20 years in a cell of 3 meters by 3 meters for the longest period. And it was just a joy to sit in his cell. So those are some of the things that one can do in Cape Town, another most beautiful city on our continent and possibly in the world. So you are most welcome to be here. Just under a week ago, the G20 foreign ministers met in Johannesburg, and I had the privilege of meeting them and greeting them as I now greet you and say a few words. And they were there to share perspectives on the global geopolitical environment and to outline priorities and tasks of the G20 Sherpa track for 2025. The meeting of foreign ministers reaffirmed the important role that is played by the G20 as the premier forum for international economic cooperation. I was very heartened to hear that confirmation. It is underscored by the fact that there is collective responsibility of the G20 for the effective stewardship of the global economy. It also has to foster the conditions for sustainable, resilient, and inclusive global growth as a critical element of the broader multilateral system. This meeting today of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors will in many ways provide further substance and strategic direction in advancing this collective responsibility, I believe. The G20 finance track has been playing this vital role for 25 years. At crucial points in our recent history, it has been able to galvanize actions with significant impact. And it was this forum that in 2008 engineered the world's response to the global financial crisis, as well as being able to mobilize the necessary financial support to enable economic recovery. So the G20 played an important role in responding to the Eurozone crisis and in maintaining global financial support and stability during and in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. I forever remember the talks that one had even on the online platforms with a number of people in Europe to see how best we can navigate our way out of the effects, both financial and health and economic impacts of COVID-19. This is a forum which has created the current global financial safety net, with the IMF at its core, and whose stewardship has proved critical to the global stability for a quarter of a century. So this meeting of the G20 finance ministers and governors, like those that have come before, does carry a really heavy and weighty responsibility. It needs to forge consensus on the actions that we must take collectively to build a global economy that is more resilient, more sustainable, as well as more equal. As it has done in the past, it needs to raise its level of ambition to achieve specific, concrete, and impactful outcomes with lasting consequences. In undertaking this task, the finance track needs to work in concert with the Sherpa track. The success of the G20 over the years has relied on alignment as well as collaboration and cooperation between the two tracks. While each track may have specific areas of focus as well as expertise and their own working arrangements, they share a common mission to enable sustainable, resilient, and inclusive global growth. The G20, therefore, was founded on the principle of cooperation, of working together, of collaboration. At this time of global uncertainty and escalating tension, it is now more important than ever that the members of the G20 should work together. The erosion of multilateralism presents a threat to global growth and stability. We know from the experience of past decades that a fair, transparent, and inclusive rules-based international order is in the end an essential requirement for economic stability and for sustained growth. At this time of heightened geopolitical contestation, a rules-based order is particularly important as a mechanism, as a way for managing disputes and resolving conflicts. There'll always be disputes, there'll always be conflicts, but as humanity, we've always found a way to resolve those conflicts. It is vital to ensuring that the rights and interests of the vulnerable are not trampled beneath the ambitions of the powerful. Multilateral cooperation is our only hope of overcoming unprecedented challenges, including slow and uneven growth, rising debt burdens and levels, persistent poverty in many parts of the world, and inequality, and the existential threat of climate change. We are not moving quickly enough and even boldly enough to address the challenges that the world is facing. We must collectively target a step change in our efforts to improve the lives of the peoples of the world, but more importantly, to protect future generations. One of the greatest impediments to growth, to development and stability is the persistence of inequality within and between nations. The pursuit of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal of reducing inequality is as much of an economic imperative as a social imperative. So as the G20, we need deliberate and coordinated efforts to focus on inclusive growth based on responsive trade and investment to grow the incomes of poor nations and the poorest in society. And this we should do in our own selfish interests. We need to ensure equal access to opportunities, especially for women and young people, as clearly set out in the UN Sustainable Development Goal. For nations to flourish, equality and prosperity must be available to everyone, regardless of their gender, of their race, their religious beliefs, or economic status. The pursuit of equality is, in the end, an imperative for wealthy and poor countries alike. That is why South Africa has placed solidarity, equality, as well as sustainability at the center of its G20 presidency, in line with the original mandate of the G20 to promote strong, sustainable, balanced, and economic growth. South Africa has identified 4 priorities for its G20 presidency. Our first priority is to take action to strengthen disaster resilience and response. The world is now prone to disasters, both in the developed economy world as well as in the developing economy part of the world. The increasing rate of climate-induced natural disasters is disproportionately affecting countries that can least afford the costs of recovery and rebuilding. And you talk to any African leader, they will tell you that as disaster strikes, as bridges are washed away, as schools and hospitals are washed away with floods that they have never seen before, that they know now emanate from climate change. They are not able to rebuild those roads, those bridges with greater ease without imposing a great debt burden on their economies, which pushes out the ambitions for further development. When repeated disasters lead to widespread damage of infrastructure, economic activity is disrupted and livelihoods are destroyed. Innovative financing and insurance mechanisms must be put in place by the global community the financial institutions, development banks, and the private sector to scale up funding for disaster prevention and post-disaster reconstruction. This is an area we do believe the G20 needs to address and to find solutions for. Our second priority is to ensure debt sustainability for developing economies. In recent years, low and middle income countries have seen their levels of foreign or sovereign debt and the costs of financing that debt rise substantially. The combined external debt stock of low-income countries more than doubled in the decade to 2022. Debt service costs are increasingly crowding out spending on education, on healthcare, and other social services, as well as infrastructure that are needed for the economic development in those countries. The work of the International Financial Architecture Working Group and other working groups will be particularly important in improving the common framework for debt treatment, accelerating the reform of multilateral development banks, and strengthening capital flows to emerging markets. Our G20 presidency will be addressing the high cost of capital faced by developing economy countries as one of the main barriers to sustainable growth. Yesterday, I had the honor to meet 7 former African heads of state and government who are headed by former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and include former President of Senegal, President Macky Sall, and Prime Minister of Ethiopia, and former President of Ghana as well. They have started the African Leaders Debt Relief Initiative. This initiative focuses on the challenges that many African countries are facing in servicing their national debt. They would like to see greater urgency in addressing the debt and solvency challenges many countries face and determined clear solutions to mobilize low-cost financing for development. I welcomed their initiative and informed them that we will support their endeavors. The G20 must show leadership in addressing the imbalances that persist in the global economy and filling the significant gap in funding required to achieve sustainable development goals. The upcoming Financing for Development Conference in Spain this June will be an important opportunity to advance this agenda. The third priority of South Africa's G20 presidency is to mobilize finance for the just energy transition. Significantly more funding is required to limit global temperature rise in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement and to do so in a manner that is equitable and just. South Africa has pioneered the use of country platforms to coordinate funding through the Just Energy Transition Partnership. We continue to advocate for greater concessional and grant funding to support the energy transition in developing economies. G20 member countries should lead the way in demonstrating ambition on climate action in the lead-up to the COP30, which will be held in Brazil later this year. The need to rapidly scale up adaptation funding is particularly important as those countries which have contributed the least to climate change are now most vulnerable to its effect. We must also scale up the use of innovative financing instruments We must also improve coordination amongst funders and unlock the potential of carbon markets to create new and diverse sources of funding. The fourth and last priority of South Africa's presidency of the G20 is to harness critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development. The world is in need of critical minerals. We need a G20 framework on green industrialization and investment that promotes value addition to critical minerals, minerals that are close to the source of extraction. We need to promote the development of low-carbon manufacturing value chains, which can support decarbonization while promoting growth. As minerals extraction accelerates to match the needs of the energy transition, the countries and local economies or communities which are endowed with these resources must be the ones that we count amongst those who should benefit. Hitherto, many people have just seen the benefit flowing out of their own impoverished countries, going to more developed economy countries. We therefore need to balance. In undertaking the work of the finance track, we seek to ensure continuity with past G20 presidencies. We rely on the deep expertise of the working groups and our experienced co-chairs, and we've got a plethora of experts who can advise, who can share their own experiences and knowledge that we need to utilize to good effect. We encourage innovation and openness in finding solutions to our most complex challenges. Now, in the context of our broader review of the G20 at the end of its cycle, I have asked South Africa's Minister of Finance to initiate efforts to strengthen the effectiveness and efficiency of working arrangements in the finance track. As we work collectively to build on the progress made in previous years, we must continue to advance our shared goals. Some may believe that we don't have shared goals, but in the end, as humanity, we are bound together by history, by everything that has happened to us as humanity, and we therefore do have shared goals. As the world navigates rapid technological changes, climate change, and pressing development needs, the finance track must once again rise to the occasion, come up with innovative solutions, solutions that are geared for the times that we live in. For the first time, the G20 is being hosted on the African continent. Now, for us, this highlights the growing importance of the continent in global economic and political discussions. Africa is home to some of the world's fastest-growing economies. It has a young and rapidly expanding population that is embracing technology and innovation very, very quickly as well. At the same time, Africa faces several challenges, such as the effects of climate change, yes, widespread poverty, and high levels of debt, and the remnants and the legacy of what happened to it during colonial rule in the past. Rather than, yes, belabor all that and blame all that on others, we are saying we want to take responsibility and we want to work with the world to make sure that we address these challenges. The summit's location underscores the need for African voices to be heard on critical global issues like sustainable growth, the digital economy, and the green industrialization process. We must focus the world's attention on the opportunities for more rapid, inclusive, and sustainable growth in Africa. And I'd like to suggest that when Africa grows, so does the world also grow. In doing so, let us raise our ambition, let us lift our gaze to deliver on the promise of growth and prosperity that this organization was founded for. Growth for all countries and for all the peoples of the world. And this, I believe, is the real mission of the G20. So I wish you well in your deliberations as you come up with those brilliant solutions that we will deliberate on in November during the Heads of State meeting in Johannesburg. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. President. For delegates, now we have breakfast downstairs in what hall? Hall 5, downstairs, breakfast for all delegates, banks and Central Bank and Ministers of Finance. Meet you downstairs while we're taking the President out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will allow the President and the Minister and the Governor to leave, and then they will be followed by the delegates and the media. Thank you.